1. A little background. I'm French, 23, looking maybe a bit younger, but not less than 20 years old. Just graduated from college, and I passed my teacher exam. So last September I started teaching math in high school with supervision of another teacher, a tutor. It is so for the first year of teaching in France. I have 3 different groups of pupils, approximately 35 each, and have still to go attend some classes that we call teacher's school. As it is my first year, I genuinely asked the advice of my tutor if I should not warn the parents as my first year and so. As I was expecting, he mostly told me that this is a bad idea for many reasons. Now that you know all of this, we can finally come into the entitled encounter. Let's call the group A and B group the 2 pupils that will matter. It had been 2 months I'd been teaching to all the 3 groups, and I was proud of myself, as Group B was making a lot of progress compared to the results they had last year. Group A was quite the opposite. While they had really incredible results last year, I really felt like they had not the knowledge they should have learned last year. I was a bit afraid. I began to think that perhaps I took it for granted, and had to rebuild what they should have learned. And as I was talking about it with my tutor, he thought it was weird that they didn't know those things, especially with all the good results they'd had last year. Fast forward a week later. I was having a meeting with my tutor when he brought the subject up again, and he told me he had investigated, and apparently during last year, the teacher they had, E.T., had been touched by the pandemic twice in the 2nd semester. He caught it and then his daughter, so they were confined 4 weeks in total. It could have explained a bit less of their knowledge on different subjects, but even if my tutor was thinking he found the solution, I was a bit doubtful of it. I learned a few days later that there was a student from Group B that was actually a transfer from Group A of last year, and he was a really good student. I thought it was my chance to learn about it. I asked, and basically the conversation was him telling me that the teacher from last year didn't give them any exams during the year, and he was just giving a high score to every pupil. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do with that. And as I always do, I just asked the advice of my tutor. This was mistake number 1, as the first thing he did was confront E.T. and ask him about it. I was thinking that was it. They'll treat this thing together. Maybe 2 days later, I was about to have a class with Group A, and when I walked into the class, E.T. was there trying to teach them a few things he apparently forgot to teach them last year. I was pissed. He was teaching in my class to my pupils without either asking me or my tutor to try to cover his mistake. And he even asked me to get the full hour of my class to try to recover their knowledge, and that he knows how better he will be at teaching these things, as he was the one that was supposed to teach them in the first place. And if I didn't accept that, he would tell the administration I didn't approve of a project that would be good for my pupils, and thus was being stubborn. It wouldn't get me fired from my job, but it would certainly affect me at the end of the year when I get my new affectation. So I accepted that he'd take my class for an hour. That was mistake number 2. The next week I was being watched by the administration to check on how things were doing. I had a meeting with my tutor and the inspector. The inspector was going to follow me all day long. The morning went well. I had all my other group and Group B, which made him have a really good impression of me. After midday lunch break, it was time to have my class with Group A. I walked into the class, ready to introduce the inspector, when I saw that E.T. was there again. I was thinking, not again, not today, not possible. The inspector asked me why there was another teacher here, and I told him that this was a class we tried last week since the pupils needed it, since they weren't at the level of knowledge they should be. The inspector first thought that I had a problem teaching them the new stuff, that they had to learn this year and was a bit late with the year's schedule. But thankfully, one of the pupils asked loudly a simple question they should have all known since the beginning of the previous year. E.T., who still hadn't noticed I arrived in the class with the inspector, tells that pupil a fully wrong answer that me and my inspector were able to hear. This is when the inspector stepped in to introduce himself. The glazed look in E.T.'s eyes when he saw the inspector was priceless. He thought it was him getting a raise. He told the inspector that I was late and that I was a bad teacher and that he was going to report me for not teaching the important stuff to my pupils. The inspector looked at me, looked at him, and asked him what does he mean. E.T. simply answered, "Look at her, she's too young to be teaching. She's making friends and not teaching at all." At that precise moment, I was so glad he had a class with Group B just before, so the inspector knows that it was some bullshit. The inspector then asked me and the pupils to leave the classroom, which I thought would never be a thing, and asked E.T. to come to the teacher's desk. There was a small window in the door so I could watch what happened, but couldn't hear what they were saying. Then I saw E.T. at the blackboard writing a lesson, which was incorrect at the very first sentence. Now here we are 4 months later, and I finally know what the consequences are. The inspector came yesterday, and while I had a really nice day showing my methods of teaching and stuff like that, he told me the story of what happened to E.T. Basically, E.T. had to pass a knowledge test in March, and the inspector is about to tell E.T. that he failed the test, and thus will face sanctions that can get him fired or at least lose the ability to teach high school, resulting in a massive payroll decrease. 2. Years ago, I applied for a job as an assistant to an attorney. When the attorney called me back to schedule the interview, she made it sound like the day and time she offered was a take it or leave it kind of thing. When I showed up at the attorney's office for my interview, the receptionist had, a few minutes before, left for her hour-long lunch break, which was at the same time each day. When the receptionist left, she locked the office up and did whatever she needed to do to have their answering service deal with their calls. At this time, the lawyer was working inside, but she did not hear me knocking on the doors and windows or chose to ignore the sounds. And at no time did she come outside on her own to look for me. I spoke to a rep from the attorney's answering service, who was very sympathetic, but did not have the ability to help me. I was finally interviewed by the attorney after the receptionist returned, and when I, very politely, let her know I had been on time but was not initially able to get in, the attorney in a very flippant and remorseless tone replied, "Well, I forgot about the receptionist's lunch break." A few days later, I got a thanks but no thanks call from the attorney, to which I replied, "Just as well, because I'd probably have said no thanks if you were calling with a job offer." The lawyer demanded to know why I would have declined to work for her, and I answered nicely, but very honestly. Her response was to yell, "Yeah, whatever," before hanging up on me. Gee, I wonder why so many people talk trash about lawyers. 3. Firstly, I want to give a lot of context to this story. We had just gotten back to in-person classes, and I go to a school that majorly hires students as interns to give work experience, and each position comes with a lot of perks. I had been a residential advisor for the majority of my schooling, and had finally been chosen to become the head residential advisor. I accepted this majorly because it meant I got to pick my own room and could ultimately stay alone if I wanted, and I really liked that. Before I became the head RA, I had helped everyone that approached me with an issue, even to the point where if we went to parties and we were all drunk, I'd still be the one in my drunken state carrying people to bed and making sure the girls weren't being touched without consent, and even broken up cases that I believe would have led to rape if I hadn't stopped the guys from taking the girls' clothes after sneaking them away. Fast forward, and I am the head RA. I am also in my final year, and if you haven't pieced together already, I am someone who puts his all into everything that I do, and I don't like to look at things from an illogical perspective. As a head RA, I also had the task of selecting the next set of RAs. All were moving smoothly, and it was really shaping up to be a good time, apart from a few hectic cases I had to handle. I can't give details because of my NDA. Then in October, COVID came to campus. The country I stay in has a lot of regulation laws on health, and they don't mess around with that stuff. I've heard of them shutting down institutions for the disregard of health laws. I do not know how accurate that is, but hearing that and being the head RA meant I ultimately had to manage COVID on campus. So we started with that the people who were infected were taken to isolation, and I and the other RAs had schedules, and we would deliver the food as well as medication and all other necessary items. It was a really hectic period. The numbers kept growing and our team was way understaffed. Then people I considered friends had to go into isolation because of contact tracing laws, and some of them had COVID. The same standard was followed for them, and halfway into isolation, they began breaking it, running around campus at night and all that. I kept warning them and letting them know they can't do that because it could lead to us losing control of the situation, and if the Ministry of Health found out during the checks, it would be dire for the institution. One of the guys doing this also had a position with the institution, and was well aware of this. Even if he wasn't, I had warned him about it. He kept on breaking isolation time after time, and I kept warning him. During all this, the RAs were having mental breakdowns, and were evidently struggling to keep up with all the situations that were happening. And I was also getting stressed, overworked, and breaking down almost every day. So I had to put my foot down, and I sent a general email to the school, informing everyone of the measures I would take if anyone was found breaking isolation. They didn't stop, and I wasn't having it, so I emailed the medical team on campus and listed their names as well as those who had positions of authority in the school, with all the relevant evidence I could gather, as well as sections of the law and code of conduct they had broken, as well as witnesses and times where I had warned them multiple times, and they refused to listen, and I filed disciplinary cases against each and every one of them. It took me about 5 hours to do all that, as I was precise in my detailing, even making sure the timestamps were as accurate as possible. Then a friend who was in isolation broke it, and I warned him and told him what I would do if he did it again. He also had a position just like the others. He broke it again. I sent him a formal warning using the school's official comms account, and told him I would take him up if he broke it again. He broke it for the third time, and I lost it when he sent me a long text on WhatsApp asking why I had only sent him a warning email and not the rest of the people who were also breaking isolation. I told him I had filed cases against him for that, and I didn't want to have to do that in his case. I told him to just stop breaking isolation, and he refused and broke it again. At this point, my back was against the wall, so I filed his own case, and I didn't spare detail. I gave all information I had about this, as well as screenshots, and all into his case. He even went ahead to email the medical team reporting me, saying I had sidelined him and was using my position to bully him. So I did not stop at the DC case. I also emailed my manager and explained the situation to her, put the department that managed student job positions in copy as well as his manager, and I went off on him. Because of all their efforts in breaking isolation, we ended up having a lockdown, and that tripled the stress we were having during this time. They still didn't stop breaking isolation. Fast forward to when the cases are over, and he had cut me out of his life. As far as he was concerned, I didn't exist to him. And he had gotten a bunch of other people to do the same. Personally, I didn't mind that. I also found out that the cases I had filed led to a lot of other people being expelled, some suspended, and a lot of them having permanent reports and strikes being placed in their records. I didn't feel bad or remorseful in any way. A lot of them had come to me telling me how I had changed, and they can't believe I would do this to them. Every time someone came to me, I would always ask them, if your actions had caused COVID to kill a student, what would you tell their parents? And they never answered me. I ended up being branded an asshole for abandoning their degrees and futures, and I really want to know. Am I the jerk? Hellfreezer's note? No, they really aren't. Actions have consequences. They chose to take the actions they did, knowing the consequences. 4. This story is about my former flatmate and nearly girlfriend, female, 19. How she turned out to be entitled, narcissistic, and aggressive, and how I, male, 20, was a bit of an asshole to my friends. My best friend, female, 20, and me were living together in a 3-bedroom flat. Half a year before graduation, our other flatmate moved out, and we allowed the entitled flatmate to move in. We had only met her via Skype because she was still living abroad. She seemed nice enough, very bubbly and excited about moving in. She was the daughter of a wealthy diplomat who, according to her dad, cut her off so she had to return to our home country and study and work. So she was struggling with money. Me and entitled friend got along really well, but she and my best friend really didn't. Me and my best friend ended up getting in a huge fight because entitled friend told me that she was harassing her and I just wanted it to stop. Anyway, Shortly after the fight with my best friend, our graduation and all of us moving out to find jobs elsewhere, I had rented a cheap vacation house in a holiday region near my home for a month and invited her to stay with me for a few days. She arrived and we immediately unpacked a month's worth of clothes in what was supposed to be my bedroom. In the next few days we got closer, although we weren't together. We visited my pre-college friends, and entitled friend also really disliked my female friends. She kept telling me they were mistreating her and they were jealous and bitchy behind my back. My friends warned me about her, but I didn't believe them because when I was there, she was always so nice. I kept thinking they were trying to sabotage what I believed to be a budding relationship. The few days that I had planned to spend with entitled friend before spending time with other friends quickly passed, and entitled friend stayed. I accepted it because I liked having her around. But as I had originally planned, I invited friends to stay, including a female friend, not my best friend, and I hadn't mentioned to entitled friend that one friend was female. That female friend was the first to arrive, when entitled friend wasn't around. We had already unpacked when entitled friend got back to the house, and when she saw my friend, she stared at her, threw her jacket and bag at her, and with her shoes still on, started stomping on my friend's clothes and bed and suitcase in an almost childish tantrum. She tried flipping the too large and heavy wooden dining table, and began throwing plates while yelling, "You fucking cheater, you let that bitch sleep on your couch. You invited me. I'm the only one allowed here. This is my house. Make her leave or I'm gonna call my dad." Better late than never, I realized that this relationship wasn't going to work out, and that when a crazy woman is throwing plates at you, it's probably time to call the police. Me and my friend left the building, called the police, and 15 minutes later we re-entered with them. Entitled friend was calmly sitting at the table smoking a joint, illegal in our country, smiling at the officers. They approached her. "Ma'am, this man called us saying you were attacking him and a friend. Is that true? Also, are you aware that possession of cannabis is illegal?" She started getting angry again. "No, they were harassing me in my house. I just defended myself." While the officer gave her a verbal warning about the weed, the other attempted to figure out who had rented the house. Of course, I had proved that I had rented the house and invited her, and my friend could corroborate our version. Entitled friend saw me show the officer the rental contract and exploded. "You can't prove anything. He attacked me. You can't arrest me. My dad's a diplomat. I have immunity. My dad will get you fired." She threw the ashtray at one of the officers. The officer told us to get out and call for backup and advice on whether entitled friend had immunity status. 5 minutes later, we got to watch as she was arrested for assault of an officer, and drug possession, handcuffed, told that in her home country she had no immunity, and driven off as she continued yelling about her powerful dad. She was released the next day and probably got off very easy in the end, but I brought her stuff to the police station and blocked her everywhere. For those that want to know the longer backstory, to get to know her on her move-in day, we invited her for dinner, where she spent the evening telling us her life story. "My dad is a diplomat. I've lived all over the world partying on yachts and meeting presidents. My dad now cut me off, so I had to find a flat share and find a job, and I'm so poor now." We believed this story because she seemed legitimately scared of her new situation. So, as a welcome gift, my best friend paid for dinner. We also covered her costs for the rented washing machine and internet so she could save money. Entitled friend and me got along really well, but somehow, starting the following week, she started disliking my best friend, and soon my best friend hated her. Since I was becoming friends with entitled friend, my best friend started distancing herself from me, and I asked why they were fighting, and entitled friend said that she is jealous of our friendship and trying to manipulate me. She's harassing me by demanding I buy her stuff because I have a rich diplomat dad. But you know I can't afford that, I'm so poor, and she's just rubbing it in. 2 weeks before graduation and all of us moving out, my best friend and me had a huge fight over her harassment and manipulative behavior, and I broke contact. After profusely apologizing and making up with my friends and best friend, after entitled friend was arrested, I found out the first evening after my best friend paid for dinner, Entitled friend asked her if she wanted to be paid back, to which my BFF casually responded, "No. It's an invitation. If you want, you can invite me next time." Later that evening, entitled friend had approached her for saying she didn't want to be paid back, but manipulatively implying that she did want to be paid back. After that, entitled friend had regularly broken my best friend's things and refused to place them when repeatedly asked, accusing her of harassment instead. I also found that instead of working, she was partying, and had more allowance from her dad than my best friend and me combined. She called my other female friends bitches and jealous sluts in my absence, and that's why they all disliked her. 5. So I work at a small-time drugstore and grocery store in a rural town, with a lot of privileged and wealthy people, many of whom are white, Indian, and Asian. This matters for the story. I've seen my fair share of idiots and Karens come and go through the store. Most of the people, however, are pretty okay. But this man, my God, I never felt so much frustration from one small interaction before. During the end of the night, we get hit pretty hard. There's a line of at least 5 per register, and we just want to get out and go home. So I am not particularly concerned about greeting the customer as much as I am just wanting them to get out of my face. Then here comes this fat, short, balding Indian man who I assume to be in his late 40s, slamming everything on the counter like someone just pissed in his cereal right before he walked in the door. The conversation goes as followed. "Will that be all for you, sir?" "What? No greet," he says. "Excuse me, sir. You are very rude. Why no greet?" he replies. "Well, I'm sorry, sir. I've just been busy." "Not good enough. You will learn manners." I wasn't particularly sure what he meant by that, but before he left, one of his bags burst open, so he slams it down again and barks at me to rebag it, like I was his servant. Talk about manners. Now, ladies and gents, you may think that was the end of the story. You'd be absolutely wrong. I came into work the next day almost entirely forgetting about the ordeal, until I get called to the back storage area by my 2 managers. Turns out this man not only called to complain about me, he wrote a review all about how bad I was. And to top it off, he claimed I was racist for simply not greeting him. I was told off by my manager and told to, and I quote, "kiss his ass from now on." I quit that very day, not willing to be bullied around just because someone wanted to have a little power trip over the lowly service workers. The moral of the story is, don't let customers bully you, be assertive, not aggressive, and don't be afraid to find another place of employment. There's always a job that will value you more as a person. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Idiots in the Wild, episode 59. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you enjoyed the video, then please do share it with all your friends and family. That helps me out more than I can describe. It's a lot. Right, let's see, we are... this is Tuesday, okay. Now, let's see. Hellfreezer's question of the day. I should have thought of this before I started recording. Well, let's see. It's kind of a funny feeling in the air today. So what do you do on those days when the world's just getting you down? What are those little things you do that help cheer you up? For me, it might be taking time to cook a nice meal, or watching an episode of a favorite TV show like The Good Place is one of my go-tos, or one of the many, many ever-increasing episodes of Star Trek that's out there. What do you like to do? Leave a comment, if you want to, below. Okay. I think we're done for now. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.